It is so exciting to be here. Thank you all for tuning in. So I've been meeting a lot of you, like, in these small groups and the road shows that we've all been doing, all the trip leaders. And the road show that I've been giving to all the different cities has kind of been the same format. So some of you maybe have had me or not, but I'll give you a tidbit so you know what we've been talking about. So the basic goal and takeaway of the classes that I've been giving is that, that concept of HP that we learned on the trip, right? HP, hashkacha pratit, higher purpose, that things will happen in your life that are talking to you. Judaism believes that God is involved in our lives on a daily basis, and things that happen are meant to resonate with us, but that they will resonate with each of us in a different way. And a story that I tell on the roadshow is imagine a father who has 10 kids and he kicks out his kids. And he says, when you figure out why I kicked you out, come back. So the first kid comes back and she says, Dad, you're always demanding of me that I have more integrity and I really step into, who I could be out there. And I'm just not. And I'm sorry, I want to try harder. He says, great, come back in. Next kid comes back. Dad, I know you always want me to clean up my stuff and be more organized. And I'm just not. And I'm really sorry, I want to try harder. He says, great, come back. And one after another, all his kids come back, each one having introspected and thought about it. What is it my father wants from me? 10 kids, 10 reasons, one act of being evicted, but 10 reasons, each personal. So HP is sort of like that. You could be going through the same thing as your coworkers, as your family, as your friends, whatever. But the same act could be saying something else to each of us. So we've been talking about on the roadshow is here's Corona, which is on the one hand so isolating, but on the other hand, so unifying that the whole world is going through the same thing at the same time. So it's sort of the same, but at the same time, it's completely different for each of us. And what's that message for you? So that's what we've been talking about. And in all the different people that I've spoken to, literally all over the world, because, Momentum, we have Momentum Sisters, I think, what is it? Over 19,000 people have been on the trips now, and literally all over the world. So really speaking to this sampling. And it's amazing how everyone is really feeling something that's so different. There's people that feel, so accomplished. They're getting so much done in their homes. And then there's people who are like, I can't believe how little I'm accomplishing every day. And then there's people that are like, I love being stuck at home with my kids and my family and not having to run my errands and not going anywhere. I'm loving it. And there's other people that are not loving it. They really are waiting to get out there. And, and on and on and on. It's really people who feel up and people who feel down, people who feel connected and people who feel disconnected. And it's really, there's no right answer. There's no one way to be. Everybody's been a little something else. So I probably had the best road show of all last night. I was meeting with Tennessee and Kentucky, and we had exactly one person who tuned in, and it was me and Beth Solomon and Kara. And the three of us had probably the best, deepest talk, because everybody really shared. It was just the three of us. And we schmoozed for about 40 minutes. And it was amazing. It wasn't recorded. I said, do not record this. It's just us. What happens on this Zoom stays on this Zoom. What happens in Kentucky stays in Kentucky. And we had this great talk. And what I shared with them, when I really hadn't shared it with anyone up until that point, and now I'm going to share it with all of you, is that I've spent this whole quarantine time feeling really uninspired. I thought I would, write a lot. I'm writing a book. I thought I would write a ton in my book. I have so many things to do in my house. I thought I'd do a ton in my house. I thought I have all this family bonding time. And, there's been a little of each, But really, I felt pretty uninspired basically the whole time, which is a little embarrassing to admit to all of you, thousands of people that are going to watch this. But, I'm just being honest. Like, I've just been sort of uninspired, and I was disappointed, because I want to be creative and productive and using this time well. And instead, I feel like I don't multitask well. I don't know if anybody really does. I'm not a big believer in multitasking. I think it just makes me do a lot of things mediocre. So in order for me to just chill and be home with my family and not be stressed out at like the 1 a.m. bedtime, and not be stressed out that my kids are yelling right now outside my door, not fighting, but yelling to one another because they forgot I'm doing another Zoom again. In order for me to be chilled out with all of that, I have to just sort of wear my chilled mom hat. I can't keep switching hats. It doesn't work for me. What works for me, because I don't love structure, which a lot of you know from my classes, I don't love structure. I don't thrive on it. It makes me feel a little constricted. So in order for me to just be okay with everybody's lack of structure, I just need to sort of sink into it and not try to get a lot done. And while that works for me at home, it left me feeling uninspired, which then bothered me and made me feel disappointed. So I really had to come to terms with it. And that's what I want to share with you, right? The title of this little talk is It's Okay Not to Be Okay. It's okay for me not to feel inspired. I sort of had to come to that. So here's the thing. We have a saying in Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, which I heard Adrian quote in a different class. For everything, there's a season, right? There's a time to cry and a time to dance. There's a time for everything. And in Judaism, what we really aspire to is to be holy. That's really what we're going for. But one of my teachers, Rabbi Niven, once said, sometimes life just is such that you're not really going for holy right now. You're just going for surviving, and that's okay. He said, after you have a baby or after you move or there's a lot of pressure at work, even though the overarching goal is we want to be holy and we want to step out of ourselves and we want to stand for something more, you can't live that every minute of every day, of every week, of every year. Like, sometimes you're just surviving. And that's okay. That has to be okay. So as we're going through the different times in life, part of being mature and stepping into that is being okay with just sort of coasting sometimes. So right now we're in a time frame that's called the Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. We're counting the days between Passover and Shavuot, which is coming up just next week. So we have a mitzvah in the Torah to count from the day after we left Egypt all the way over on this bridge until we get to Mount Sinai, where the Jewish people got the Ten Commandments, got the Torah, saw God speak. These two holidays are connected. And that's because when Moses said that famous line that you all know, let my people go, right? You remember that? Everybody remembers that. Let my people go. So that actually is half of a sentence. And it wasn't Moses saying, let my people go. It was Moses quoting God, saying, God said, let my, capital M, let my people go. God said, let his people go. That's what Moses was saying. But that's only half the sentence. The other half is, let my people go so that they may serve me. Which means we didn't get out of Egypt so we could retire to Florida, even though Florida is great. That's not the reason why we got out, just to be free and do what we want. The reason why we got out of Egypt is so that we could go to Mount Sinai and have this moral purpose, have this driven goal of what the Jewish people stands for, a light unto the nations, and to stand for morality and to carry that through the ages. So we get out of Egypt and immediately we start counting. So we get the message, like, you have a purpose, you need to be something. And the mystics tell us that embedded in this time is this period of exponential growth, that the Jewish people went from being slaves in Egypt, like the lowest of the low, to just 49 days standing at Mount Sinai and like talking to God, hearing God. Like embedded in this time is exponential growth. And here I am in quarantine feeling totally uninspired, like totally out of it. Do you see the guilt that could build up here? You see the conflicting aspirations? Like on the one hand, it's like exponential growth is available to me. And on the other hand, I just don't feel like it. And feeling conflicted like that is just not who I want to be, but yet here I am. How do you forgive yourself in a moment like that when you know you want to show up differently and you're just not? You know, maybe you're home with your kids and you want to be that kind of mom and like you're not, or that kind of spouse and you're not, or this kind of self-motivated and making things happen and you're not. Like, how do you forgive yourself for those moments of not really being who you want to be? So we get the answer in next week's holiday, Shavuot. It says this. It says, when the Jewish people got to the desert, it talks about us in the Torah in the plural. Obviously, because the Jewish people is not one person, we're 3 million people who left Egypt, who are moving through the desert, camping here, camping there, saying this, doing that. Everything is in the plural. I've said it, at least if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, right? The Torah is written in code, which means as you're reading the text, you want to look for anything funny, anything that jumps out at you is your crack in the matrix. And there's all these deeper meanings that are hidden in the text. So one of the ways that we find the codes that are hidden in the Torah is through grammar. If the grammar doesn't match, if the pronouns are off, if the word choice is funny, all of that is meant to bother the thinking reader. My husband says a person reading the Torah is supposed to be bothered. And if you're not bothered, you're probably just not paying attention. If you're paying attention, especially in the Hebrew, you don't see this so much in the English, but in the Hebrew, if you're paying attention, all these things jump out at you like, that's not the way it should say that. What's wrong with that? So we get this major code red flag when we get to Mount Sinai. It says the Jewish people camped, and it says Vayichan, which means, and he camped. It should say Vayachanu, and they camped, the plural form in Hebrew, which it says in many other places when the Jewish people camped here, there, and everywhere in the desert. It says Vayachanu, and they camped. And all of a sudden in Mount Sinai, it says Vayichan, singular. So the commentators jump on that. And Rashi, who's our MVP commentator, says that the Jewish people were so unified, we were like Ki'ish echad b'lev echad. We were like one person with one heart, which is very beautiful. It speaks to our unity. It speaks to our togetherness. It's gorgeous. But the Torah says the same thing about Egypt. It says when the Jewish people left Egypt, we leave, and Egypt is decimated behind us. And when we're about a week out, Egypt sort of wakes up and says like, wait, what did we just do? Why did we let those slaves go? And they chase after us. And they catch us at the shore of the Red Sea. So we have the sea in front of us, and we have the Egyptians gaining on us behind us, and the people start freaking out. And they actually say to Moses, like, it's like a Jackie Mason skit. They say to Moses, what, there weren't enough graves in Egypt? You had to bring us here to the desert to die? That's what it says in the Torah, right? Do Jews always have a sense of humor, I guess? I don't know. Like, what are we doing here? We had to schlep all the way here to die here. We couldn't just die in Egypt. Like, what are you doing? And Moses starts to pray, and God says to Moses, well, don't call out to me, go into the ocean, like go into the Red Sea. And the Egyptians are chasing us. And it says, when the Egyptians were chasing us, it says, V'hine Mitzrayim noseya acharehem. And the Egyptians were chasing after the Jewish people, but noseya is singular. It should say that they were chasing plural. Instead, it says it singular. And Rashi says almost the same exact comment that he said about the Jews. He says almost exactly the same thing here about the Egyptians. He says, B'lev echad, ke'ish echad, like with one heart, like one person. So you got to be like, hang on. The Jewish people, at their highest moment of about to have this private audience with God, like one person with one heart, you think it's like the highest accolade you could give us. But the Egyptians get almost the exact same comment when they're chasing after us to kill us. Like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? So if you read carefully, the answer is right there. About the Jewish people, it says, like one person with one heart. About the Egyptians, it flips it. And it says, like with one heart, like one person. What's the difference? It's almost exactly the same, but it is worlds apart. The Jewish people, when we got to Mount Sinai, we were like one person with one heart. One person means we were unified like a body. We all know we're part of a whole. We sense that. I remember I read a story one time, I think it was like in Reader's Digest or on paper or something random. And it was saying how this guy was stopped on the side of the road. And it must have been in a Jewish publication. And this guy was pulled over on the side of the road, and another Jewish family's driving by, and they see a guy with a kippah, yarmulke on his head, and they pull over, and they're like, oh, can we help you? And they start helping and whatever. And it turns out the guy's not Jewish. And schmoozing, this, that, they start talking, he's not Jewish. So like, why wearing a yarmulke? So he said, oh, my wife is Jewish, and she keeps one in the glove compartment for me. And she told me if I ever pull over, I should put this on because someone will definitely stop for me. The Jewish people, somehow, when we see each other, they call it bageling. We start saying Jewish things. We start connecting to each other. You say hello. We know we're one. We don't always live there. We don't always connect to it, but we know it. And when we were at Mount Sinai, we were so connected to our unity. We so knew we were in this together that we all wanted the same thing. We all wanted to be at Mount Sinai. We all wanted to stand for something greater. First came our unity, and then came our desire to be together. We all wanted the same thing. With the Egyptians, the desire came first. It says, belev echad k'ish echad, with one heart, like one person. They say the best way to unify people is to give them a common enemy, because they forget all their other differences and they focus on that. It says when the Egyptians were chasing the Jewish people, they didn't feel a unity, but they all wanted the same thing. They all wanted to chase us. And in that uniformity of desire, therefore they became unified. But as soon as that one thing that's uniting you with your enemy goes away, then you remember all your differences. Then you're not unified anymore. So which came first? The knowledge that we're all one, that we're all connected, and then we want the same thing? Or we want the same thing, so I'll make a partnership with you because I want the same thing as you. It may look the same, it's totally different. Because one is uniformity that creates unity, and one is unity without uniformity. See, when we got the Torah, we got 613 mitzvot, 613 commandments. There is no way for one person to keep the whole Torah. You just can't do it, because some mitzvot are for the king, and some are for the priest. Some are for married people, some are for single people, some are for parents, some are for children, some are for men, some are for women, some are for rich people, some are for poor people, some are for people who live in Israel, some are for people who live out of Israel. There isn't any possibility of one person keeping the whole Torah. You know why? Because the Torah was not given to any one person. The Torah was given to the entire Jewish people. It's not just that we have unity without uniformity. It's the fact that we cannot have uniformity that gives us our unity. When the Torah was given to all of us, it was given to us because we're not uniform, because we're not all the same. And nonetheless, we come together like this. Imagine if on your hand you had only thumbs. Your thumbs are helpful, but only if you have opposing digits. I'm all thumbs is not a compliment. That's not a good thing. It's because you have 2 different hands, and each with 5 fingers. That's what lets your hands accomplish things. If you were all thumbs, you couldn't accomplish anything. The Jewish people is the same. The reason why we can accomplish so much is because we're so different. So as we're counting this time of Sphira, I'm going through these road shows, and before also, but during especially, and I'm hearing it, I'm hearing the unity without uniformity. I'm hearing how it's okay that I'm down because you're up. And if it's okay if you're down because maybe I'll be up. And there's so many of us all sort of walking in step together that when one of us is down and one of us is up, that there's a time for everything. But we don't all have to be going through the same thing at the same time. And in fact, it's because we're not going through the same thing at the same time. That's what gives us the possibility of really making a difference in the world. So next week, Shavuos starts Thursday night. And what we're celebrating is the receipt, is the giving of the Torah, the giving of the 10 Commandments. We're celebrating that we received it, not one person alone. That would be so arrogant for any one person to think it's all up to them. But it's because we all accepted it together that if any one of us ever feels low, it's okay. There's millions and millions of other people in this with you. You're not alone. And what Judaism always tells us, if we plug into God, then anything is possible. Imagine a lamp that's giving all this light. But then and it thinks I can fill the room with light. I'm such a great lamp. I'm so full of power. But then you unplug the lamp. The lamp never had any power to begin with. It's only because the lamp is plugged in that then it can give light. That's what Judaism is pointing us towards. That's what Shavuos is pointing us towards. That when the Jewish people is plugged into something bigger, that's when we really shine our light. And if you're feeling tired, somebody else will shine their light. We're all in this together. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this was helpful, whether you're feeling up or you're feeling down. Know that everybody has your back. Momentum sisters all over the world, Jewish people all over the world, humanity is in this together, and we'll get through this together. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Nili, 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 Nili. That was lovely. Can I ask you some questions? Do you have a few
Yes,
minutes?
please. That's the best part.
Okay. So first of all, I really loved what you talked about, the unity and uniformity and how they can parallel each other. But what about if you're in a family right now where their idea is unity and uniformity, not unity without uniformity? And often you'll see this in families where one party feels like that the way their daughter or son or spouse is dealing with things aren't carrying their load, if you will. It's not like you explained that with all of those different commandments, all those different connection points. If you're not doing it, someone else will. But how do you square that away in families where there's so much pressure for everybody to be,
I mean, I guess you have to sort of say, who's creating the pressure for everybody to be?
What if it's a parent? What if it's a parent? What would you say to that parent?
A parent who's creating that pressure on their kids? Yeah. I mean, the fact that we're feeling like things need to get done, seeing the unity without uniformity within our families, it's like sometimes, when I'm feeling down and I need a break, it helps me relate to, sometimes my kids, I think they're being lazy. Maybe they just need a break. Maybe they're going through something I know nothing about. Maybe, all their friends are WhatsApping and not including them. Or maybe they're an extrovert. I'm an introvert. So I'm loving being home. And they're withering away without their friends, where they thrive on structure and there's no structure. So that also could, if we come from the mindset of unity without uniformity, then when the people around us are different, we're ready for it. All right, we expect them not to be like us. And hopefully with that comes forgiveness and permission to not be on my schedule.
Right.
Does that
Now,
make sense? Does that answer your
it
question?
it answers it perfectly. You know, a lot of people are commenting about the lack of understanding between peers, friends. If one has a large family and they're feeling the pressures of, you know, being overloaded there, and the others who are perhaps on their own and alone. When you're alone, when it's just you and you feel low,
Mm.
it is nice and comforting, I would imagine, to think that, you know, the rest of the world can be holding up your part. But what words of wisdom or motivation would you give a person who's on their own, who feels disappointed in themselves for being non-productive, if you will?
I mean, Judaism teaches us that each person is a whole world.
Right.
So it says that when all the elephants were created, there wasn't one elephant created. It was elephants, plural, were created, and trees were created. It wasn't one apple tree that then all the other apple trees, all the trees were all created at the same time. Fish and birds and grass and everything was all created at the same time, except for humanity. There was one human being, because the world is worth it for one human being. And then on the first day that human being was created, he blew it. And that's okay too. You know, making mistakes and coming back from that and forgiving yourself is part of it. So I think it's on the one hand, realizing your importance and how much you have to give. And at the same time realizing, but I'm also just human, and I'm allowed to like curl up and just like take some time off and like blow it right now. So it's that balance of self-importance and self-forgiveness. I hope we can all stay connected to that.
What was that beautiful, beautiful quote? In one pocket he had, "The world was created for me." Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think it was King David, right? In one pocket he had a piece of paper that said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, for the whole world's created for me. And in the other pocket he had a piece of paper that said, I'm dust and ashes and like worm food. You know, and it was that combination of like, be totally humble. Like, who do you think you are? But at the same time, the whole world was created for me doesn't mean everybody serve me. It means it's all my responsibility to step into. You know, it says it's not up to us to succeed or complete the work, but it's up to us to do something. Don't do nothing, do something. But doing something doesn't have to look like 24/7. You know, understanding doing something means there's other people who could also do this mitzvah. It's not all up to me.
Ah,
You know, and that's like the dance. I feel like it's like a dance. You got to constantly adjust to make sure that you're forgiving yourself, but stepping up, but forgiving yourself when you don't. I mean, I'm like in this too, you know, figuring it out.